It was around 11:30 p.m. when I finished my last shift at Walmart. I'd been working the overnight shifts for almost 2 months, trying to save up some cash before my semester started. Most of the time, the store was quiet and boring. But this particular night, something felt different. The usual late-night crew was working. Tom, the security guard who'd been there for years. Lisa, the night shift supervisor who was always too tired to even look at the schedule. And then me, Chris, the guy who just wanted to get through the night without any weird stuff happening. But weird stuff started happening that night. It was slow, which was typical. The aisles were nearly empty except for a few lonely customers. Most of us were stuck in the back room, sorting inventory, trying not to fall asleep standing up. But then, just before midnight, I noticed something strange. A man, at least I think he was a man, was lingering by the electronics section, staring at the shelves like they held some kind of secret. I wasn't sure at first. Maybe he was just a late-night shopper who had nowhere else to be. But there was something unsettling about the way he stood there. His hands were too still, his head slightly tilted, and he didn't seem to notice the other customers around him. I glanced over at Lisa, who was in the office, doing paperwork. Tom was doing his rounds, so I figured it was fine to keep an eye on the guy. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. I turned around to grab a box of stock from the back room, and when I came back to the aisle, the man was gone. I didn't hear him leave. No footsteps, no rustling in the aisles, nothing. Just gone. I should have written it off as nothing. But when I walked down the aisle, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Right where he'd been standing, there was a fresh, small puddle of something dark on the floor. I know what you're thinking. It could have been something simple, right? A spilled drink or some random mess. But this was different. The liquid was too thick, and it didn't have the smell of any spilled soda or juice. It had a metallic, almost coppery scent to it. Blood. I had no idea why, but I immediately felt a chill creep up my spine. Tom came around the corner then, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim light of the aisle. He noticed the puddle too. "Hey, you see this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Tom knelt down, his face contorted in confusion. "That's weird. I didn't hear anything." I tried to joke it off. "Maybe it's just a bad prank or something." But Tom didn't laugh. Instead, he got this look on his face like he'd seen something he couldn't explain before, like his years of patrolling this place had taught him to trust his gut. "Let's just clean it up, Chris. I'll take care of it. You go check the cameras." I nodded, uneasy, but as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I made my way to the security office, where Lisa was still buried in her paperwork. She barely looked up as I walked in. "Anything weird going on tonight?" I asked, half joking, half serious. Her eyes flicked toward the monitors. "Nothing except that damn guy in electronics. I swear I've seen him before." That stopped me in my tracks. I hadn't told her about the man yet, and now she was talking about him like she knew him. "Wait, what? You've seen him?" I asked. Lisa looked at me, her face suddenly pale. "Yeah, a few months ago. Same place, same time. He always shows up right before the shift ends." My heart raced. "Are you saying he's been here before?" Lisa didn't answer. Instead, she turned her attention back to the monitors. "Just keep an eye on him. I don't like it when people wander the store at this hour." That's when I realized how wrong everything felt. The store had always been strange at night, but this was something different, something dark. And that's when I heard it. A soft, faint noise, like a whisper, came from the aisle behind me. I froze. The whisper was so faint, I wasn't even sure I'd actually heard it at first. My ears were on high alert, but there was no denying it now. Someone or something was in the aisle behind me. I glanced over at Lisa, who was still focused on the monitors. Tom had gone off to clean up the spill, so it was just the two of us in the back office. I didn't want to sound paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I got up, trying to stay as quiet as possible, and made my way back into the store. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, casting strange shadows that seemed to shift and move out of the corner of my eye. It was too quiet, too still. I crept down the electronics aisle, the spot where I'd last seen the man. The shelves were lined with TV screens, radios and phones, all glowing faintly in the darkness. But there was no sign of the man. No puddle, no dark stain on the floor, just the hum of the electronics. But as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A reflection. In the screen of an old flat-panel TV, I could see the outline of someone standing behind me. The reflection was distorted, but there was no mistaking it. There was a figure, tall, thin, and looming in the dim light, standing just a few feet behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. But there was no one there. Nothing. I felt a surge of panic hit me, and I backed away from the aisle, my feet stumbling as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Was I imagining it? Had the exhaustion of the late shift gotten to me? But then I heard it again. The whisper. This time it was louder, clearer. "Chris?" I turned, but all I saw was the empty aisle stretching out in front of me. My body was frozen in place, but my mind was racing. I couldn't explain it. The voice was soft, almost like it was being carried on the air, but it was unmistakable. It knew my name. I quickly darted back toward the security office, but as I passed through the aisles, I felt something following me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I sped up my pace. The store seemed to grow darker, even though the lights were still on. The noise of the whisper was almost overwhelming now, echoing in my mind. I reached the security office, slamming the door behind me. Lisa looked up, startled by the noise. "What's going on?" she asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. I didn't know how to explain it. How could I tell her that I had just heard a voice? But there was no one there. How could I tell her that I felt like I was being hunted in my own workplace? "I think I need to go home," I said, my voice shaky. Lisa stood up, walking over to the door. "You okay? You don't look so good." Before I could answer, the lights flickered. The sound of static filled the room for a brief moment, and then the screens on the monitors went black. The silence was deafening. Then, in the pitch-black room, I heard the whisper again. Closer this time, almost right behind me. "Chris!" I spun around. My breath caught in my throat, and there, standing in the doorway, was the man. But he wasn't just standing anymore. He was leaning in, his face distorted with a grotesque grin that stretched unnaturally wide. His eyes were hollow, empty voids that seemed to swallow all the light in the room. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Felt like the walls were closing in on me. The man, whatever he was, took a slow, deliberate step forward. "Get away from me!" I managed to yell, but my voice was weak, like it was being swallowed by the air around me. The man didn't respond. Instead, he reached out with a hand that was too long, too thin. His fingers hovered in the air, inches from my face. And that's when I saw it. The shadow in the corner of the room, just behind him. It wasn't a person. It was something much darker. Something that couldn't belong in this world. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't a man. It wasn't a prank. This was something far worse. And it was here. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to distance myself from the man standing in the doorway. But the more I moved, the closer he seemed to get. His smile didn't waver, didn't shift. It was unnatural, stretched far beyond anything a human face should be capable of. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The air around me felt thick, suffocating. The lights above flickered again, casting everything in a harsh, uneven glow. My eyes darted to the monitors. They were still dark, nothing but static. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. And then I saw it again. The shadow. It wasn't just behind the man anymore. It was shifting, moving, alive, like it was slowly creeping across the floor toward me. It had no shape, no form. It was pure darkness, and it seemed to distort everything it touched. It was like the very essence of the room was being sucked into it, swallowed whole. What do you want?" I managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't respond. Instead, his mouth opened impossibly wide, as if it could stretch forever, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth that gleamed like knives in the dim light. His eyes, those black voids, seemed to absorb every ounce of light around him, leaving nothing but a suffocating darkness. And that darkness was spreading. The air felt colder, heavier. I could feel it pushing against me, like it was trying to crush me into the ground. My thoughts were a blur. I needed to escape. I had to get out of there. I turned, bolting toward the back exit, desperate to reach the emergency door. But the moment I moved, the shadow surged forward. It wasn't just in the corner anymore. It was everywhere, creeping along the walls, the floors, the very air around me. I was trapped. Suddenly, I heard it. A loud crack followed by a thundering crash came from the aisle behind me. I whipped around, panic bubbling up in my throat. It wasn't just the shadow anymore. The man had moved. He was right there, his eyes locked with mine, and I swear I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. My body refused to move, as if something was holding me in place. His grin widened, but it wasn't a smile. It was a promise of something far worse than death. Leave. The voice was deep, almost a growl, and it reverberated in my chest like a warning. It was the voice of something ancient, something evil. I had to get out. I couldn't stand there any longer. I turned and ran. I sprinted toward the back exit, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence. But the closer I got, the darker it became. The lights were completely out now, and all I could hear was the shuffling sound of something following me, crawling in the dark. It was behind me. I could feel its presence, feel the air shift with every movement it made. I reached the door. It was locked. No, I slammed my palm against the door in panic, trying to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. I turned around just as I heard the whispers again. They were louder now, closer, surrounding me. You shouldn't have stayed. I didn't know what to do. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The store, once familiar, was now a twisted maze that seemed to close in on me. The shelves felt like they were leaning toward me, as though the whole building was trying to swallow me whole. In a last-ditch effort, I grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall and smashed it against the door handle. The door creaked and groaned as it slowly opened. I threw myself through the door, nearly falling onto the ground outside. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I ran through the parking lot, not caring who saw me, just needing to get as far away from that place as possible. My breath was ragged, my legs burning, but I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I ended up in my car, locked the doors, and sped away without a second thought. The thing was still out there. I don't know what it was, but I knew one thing for sure: it wasn't human. And I'll never, ever go back to that Walmart again. The night didn't end when I left Walmart. Felt like it had only just begun. I barely managed to make it home, my mind racing with 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. I had to get some sleep. I had to forget what happened, if just for a few hours. But when I lay in bed, all I could hear were those whispers. Chris, they echoed in my mind. I could still feel the presence of that thing, its eyes watching me even from miles away. My body was exhausted, but my brain wouldn't shut off. I kept seeing flashes of the man's distorted face, his hollow eyes, that grinned too wide to be human. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. Couldn't be. The next day, I called in sick. I couldn't go back there, not after what I'd seen. But I wasn't sure if I had a choice. I couldn't shake the feeling that Walmart was watching me, waiting. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, stress, anxiety. But then, things started happening. Little things, strange things. I was sitting at home, trying to relax with the TV on, when I received an email. It wasn't from anyone I knew. It had no subject line, just a single line of text. You left. You can't run. I stared at it for a long time, feeling my heart rate pick up. It was sent from an anonymous email address, and I had no idea how it got to me. I thought about calling the police, but who would believe me? Who would believe a story about a shadow, a man that shouldn't exist, and whispers that haunted me long after I left the store? The next night, I couldn't help it. I had to go back. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the fear of it following me forever, or maybe I just needed to see it with my own eyes. to prove I wasn't crazy. But I drove to Walmart again, my car pulling into the parking lot under the harsh fluorescent lights. Felt different this time. The air was thick, suffocating, and as I stepped out of my car, a strange chill crawled down my spine. The doors to Walmart slid open with a soft hiss. I stepped inside, but the store was empty, too empty. The silence was deafening. There were no customers, no staff, only the quiet hum of the overhead lights. I walked through the aisles, each one more unsettling than the last. It felt like the walls were watching me, like the store itself had become a living, breathing thing. And then I heard it, the whisper. It came from the back of the store, just past the aisle of cleaning supplies. "Chris," I froze. I knew that voice. I couldn't see anything, but I knew it was there, waiting for me. I could feel it. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned and bolted down the aisle, desperate to get out, but the lights flickered again. The store seemed to warp around me, the shelves stretching, the shadows growing deeper. And then I saw him, the man. He was standing at the end of the aisle just like before. His eyes were black as night, hollow and empty, staring directly at me. His grin had grown even wider, impossibly wide, as if his mouth could stretch to the edges of the world. "You came back," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but I could hear it clearly, like it was coming from the very air around me. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I could feel the darkness closing in, swallowing the light, pulling me toward it. "Leave, now." I tried to scream, but the words wouldn't come. My legs were frozen, and the floor beneath me felt like it was turning to quicksand. The shadows were crawling up my legs, pulling me down. But then, something strange happened. A loud crash echoed from the far end of the store. I don't know what it was, but it sounded like something, or someone, was breaking through the walls. The man's eyes flicked toward the sound, and for a brief second, I saw a glimpse of something bigger, something darker. The shadows around me pulled back. The man's grin faltered, and I took that as my chance. I ran. I ran faster than I thought I could. My feet were barely touching the ground as I sprinted toward the exit. I didn't look back. I didn't care if I was hallucinating. I just needed to leave. When I reached the doors, I slammed into them, pushing them open with all my strength. I tumbled out into the parking lot, gasping for breath, my body trembling. I got into my car. I drove home as fast as I could, my hands shaking, my heart hammering in my chest. I haven't been back to Walmart since. I don't know if I'll ever go back. Something is still there, watching, waiting. I can't escape it. I know it's only a matter of time before it finds me again. I thought I had escaped. I really did. For a week after that night, I stayed far away from Walmart. I stayed home, tried to distract myself, and hoped the nightmares would stop. But deep down, I knew this wasn't something you could outrun. It was on a Tuesday morning that I received the final email. The subject line was simple: "It's not over." I opened it without thinking, my heart sinking as the message loaded. "You left, but you didn't escape. Walmart is a part of you now." I slammed my phone down in disgust, my hands shaking. My mind raced. I tried to convince myself it was just a prank. Maybe someone who had worked there before, maybe a sick joke. But in my gut, I knew that wasn't the case. This wasn't something I could explain away. I started getting calls, unknown numbers. I ignored them at first, but they kept coming. Day after day. Couldn't block them all. Eventually, I answered. It was Tom. "Chris, man, you're still alive?" His voice sounded shaky, almost like he was scared. Tom had never been afraid of anything in the store. He was the one that dealt with the weirdos and the late-night troublemakers. But now, I could hear the fear in his voice. "Tom, what's going on? What the hell is happening?" There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "I saw it. Last night. It's not just you. It's all of us. It's inside the store." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I mean, it's everywhere. The man. The thing you saw? It's not just a ghost, Chris. It's something worse. The store, it changes. You don't just leave it. You can't. Not completely. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. What are you talking about? What happened to you? Tom didn't answer right away. Then, his voice broke through the silence, low and trembling. I saw it too, and now it's following me. It won't let me leave. I tried to quit, but they won't let me. There was a sharp click on the other end of the line, and then static. The call dropped. I sat there, staring at my phone, barely able to breathe. Tom's words echoed in my head. It won't let me leave. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just something that happened to me. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just in my head. Something dark, something malevolent was attached to that store, and it was spreading. I decided I had to go back. I had to confront whatever it was. I couldn't let it consume me. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe answers, maybe closure. Or maybe, just maybe, I was hoping to put an end to the nightmare once and for all. I got in my car and drove to Walmart again. The parking lot was empty when I arrived, and the store seemed even quieter than before. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. The store felt like it was alive, like it was waiting for me. I walked through the doors, each step echoing in the silence. The air felt cold. The shadows were darker, longer, creeping along the walls like they were alive. "Chris!" That whisper again. It came from behind me, and I spun around, but there was no one there. The aisles were empty, the shelves stacked with boxes, but there was something about them, something that didn't belong. The lights flickered above me. I heard something shift, like footsteps, but when I looked, there was no one there. The store wasn't just empty. It was wrong. It was as if the very walls were closing in on me. I reached the back of the store, toward the section where I had first seen the man, the spot where everything had started. But now there was something different. There was no electronics aisle, no products on the shelves. It was just a long, dark hallway that seemed to stretch into eternity. I hesitated, but then I saw something, or rather someone. It was Lisa, but she wasn't the same. Her eyes were hollow, empty. She was standing at the end of the hallway, staring at me with that same twisted grin I'd seen on the man's face. "Lisa," I called, my voice shaking. She didn't respond. She just stood there, unmoving, her head tilted unnaturally to one side. And then, from behind her, I saw it. The shadow. It was growing, spreading, consuming everything in its path. The hallway stretched and twisted, becoming more distorted, more grotesque, like it was alive. I took a step forward, and then everything around me went black. The next thing I knew, I was outside. I don't remember how I got there. I don't remember running. All I know is I was gone. I've never been back to that Walmart. I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back. But every night, when I close my eyes, I hear that whisper. I see those empty eyes, and I know the truth. Once you walk through those doors, there's no escaping. You're part of the store now, and it never lets you leave. It's been weeks now since I left Walmart, but the truth is, I still haven't really left. I thought that by staying away from the store, by pretending like nothing had happened, I could escape. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel it, like an invisible thread tied to me, pulling me back. It was always there, always waiting. I tried to go on with my life, tried to convince myself that I was just imagining things. Maybe the stress of the job had gotten to me. Maybe it was just a bad dream. But the whispers, they didn't stop. Every time I tried to sleep, I could hear them. Soft, distant whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. At first, I thought it was just the remnants of that place haunting me. But as time passed, the whispers grew louder, clearer. "Chris." The voice was the same, but it didn't sound like the man. It didn't sound like Lisa. It was something else, something darker. One night, I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through my phone when I saw something strange. An alert, a notification from my old work email account. I didn't even remember leaving that account open. But there it was, a new message, sent from an untraceable address. It was simple like the others, only this one hit harder. It made my blood run cold. You don't understand yet. You never will. Walmart is calling you back. I slammed my phone down, my hands trembling. I knew I couldn't ignore it. I knew I couldn't just walk away any longer. Whatever had started in that store, whatever had followed me out, wasn't going to let me go until I confronted it. I drove to the store again. It wasn't an easy decision, but there was no other way. I knew that I couldn't outrun it. I had to find out the truth. I had to see it for myself once and for all. When I pulled into the parking lot, I could feel it. The air was thick, heavy. The place seemed alive, like it was watching me, waiting for me to step inside. The automatic doors slid open, and for the first time in weeks, I stepped back into that place. The smell of plastic and metal hit me immediately. The store was empty just like before, eerily empty. But this time, there was no hesitation. I knew what I had to do. I walked down the aisles, past the familiar shelves of products I used to stock. But this time, everything looked wrong. The lights flickered in a constant, rhythmic pulse. The shadows stretched unnaturally long across the floor, reaching toward me like claws. The place felt abandoned, but I could feel it, the presence. It was there, watching. I made my way to the back of the store, toward the electronics section, the section where I had first seen the man, the section where everything had started. And that's when I saw it. The hallway. It was no longer a part of the store. It was a rift, something more. The walls twisted and bent, as though the store itself had been torn open. The ceiling was gone, replaced by darkness that seemed to stretch forever. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. And in the distance, I saw it. A figure. It was Lisa, but this time her body was contorted. Her face was twisted in a grotesque mockery of a smile. Her eyes black, empty voids. She wasn't standing anymore. She was crouched low to the floor, watching me with that same unblinking stare. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered, her voice echoing in the distorted space around us. I felt my stomach churn, my chest tightening. The shadows around me seemed to pulse with life, closing in on me, suffocating me. The entity wasn't just in the store anymore. It was everywhere. It was inside my head, in the very air I breathed. But then, as if on cue, the ground beneath me trembled. A loud cracking sound echoed through the store as the walls buckled and split. The darkness surged forward, consuming everything in its path. I tried to run, but the shadows were too fast. They reached for me, grabbing my legs, pulling me down into the floor. I screamed, but the darkness swallowed the sound. The lights flickered one last time, and then everything went black. I don't know how I'm writing this. I don't know if I'm even alive anymore. All I know is that the store, that place, is still with me. It's not just in my nightmares anymore. It's in the very fabric of my reality. I'm trapped in it, and so are you. If you've read this far, you've felt it too. The pull, the whispers, the darkness. Walmart is calling, and there's no escaping. I don't know what's real anymore. Time, place, or space. They've all started to blur together. I can feel the presence now, constantly. It's always just behind me, just around the corner, waiting for me to slip up. I've tried everything. Tried running, tried fighting it, tried ignoring it. But it won't let go. And I've learned the hard way that it never will. You see, the thing about Walmart, it's not just a store. It's a place where something ancient and twisted waits. It has always been there, buried deep beneath the aisles, beneath the shelves filled with cheap plastic toys and groceries. But it never used to care about the customers. Not until I came in. At first, I thought it was the man. The tall, thin figure with the dark eyes, his grin wide and empty. But that was just the surface. The man? He was just the messenger, the face of something far worse, something that lurked in the shadows, twisting the very fabric of reality itself. And now it has followed me, into my home, into my dreams. Everywhere I go, I feel its presence. I hear the whispers, and I can never escape. The thing is, I've realized something. This isn't a curse. It's not some random series of events that happened to me. No, I've been chosen. The store doesn't let anyone go. If you walk through those doors, you're part of it. It's like an infection that spreads inside you, creeping into your very bones, until you can't remember where the store ends and you begin. It waits for you, watches you, knows everything about you, and now I understand. I understand why Tom couldn't leave, why Lisa never left, why all of us are trapped in its web. Because once you've seen it, once you've felt it, there's no going back. It's too late. The store owns you now. It is you. Tonight, I made a choice. I could keep running, keep pretending that it's all a nightmare, that maybe one day, maybe tomorrow, I'll wake up and it will all be over. But I know better now. There's only one way out. I can feel it calling me again, pulling me back to that place. And this time, I'm not running. I have to face it. I have to go back to Walmart. And this time, when I step through the doors, I'll go in knowing that it's not just a store anymore. It's part of me. It's where I belong now. And maybe, just maybe, I'll finally understand what it wants. But I know this, there's no escaping it. And when I step inside, I'll never leave.